Before we get started with the show, here's a quick word from our sponsor, Global Training Center. As trade compliance professionals, you want to make sure that your procedures and documentation are completed as correctly as possible to avoid any delays and possible fines. We provide a range of trade compliance courses that will fit your needs. From in-person or web training to recorded on-demand courses, we can train one or even thousands on your team through your learning platform or on our portal. We can even customize a private session for your team. Go to globaltrainingcenter.com to find out more.
Hey folks, this is Andy Shiles, Lalo Solorzano, and we're in for Simply Trade. And I'm telling you, we have got a great discussion in for today. Trump has been in office at the time we're recording this 1 month, and it seems like a year or more. There's been so much going on. And with that, you know, talking about trade and all that, Lalo, I'm telling you, I've got people coming to me going, holy crap, you know, and I said, well, if you don't like it, wait 5 minutes, it's going to change again. So, but what do you think from your perspective, Lalo, of what you're seeing?
Same. I mean, you're right about 1 month feels like about a year, it's in trade policy anyway. I mean, because it has been rapid moving, and again, nothing any one of us should complain about that are servicing the trade industry, only because, number one, it keeps us updated and sharp, right? And number two, there's enough work for all of us to be able to do, in all sectors. So today's show, Andy, a little segue there is someone from Mexico. I guess not literally, technically from Mexico. He was born there in Mexico, but his business is in the United States, is established in the U.S., and it's built to help businesses in the U.S. and other countries establish businesses in Mexico and kind of create strategies, in many cases, trade strategies and or logistical strategies, supply chain strategies, et cetera, by nearshoring. And then I guess before we go on, I want to remind everybody, I do remember this. Honestly, it was like engraved in my head. But what does Nepanoa mean? It means partner or someone that walks beside you or something, right, Alberto, in the Aztec native language. And that I don't remember. I think it was like Nahuatl or something like that, right? I don't remember what.
You got it, Lalo. Nepanoa means to accompany Nahuatl. Nahuatl was the language spoken by the Aztecs, most important civilization, the pre-Columbian era. And it's a verb. It means to accompany, which means to be a companion, be a partner. And that's exactly what we do. We accompany businesses as they expand, transform their operations between the United States and Mexico. You got it right. We're truly a binational firm. I'm saying hello to you guys from Chicago, where you have your house. Mi casa es tu casa. We have people in New York, in Houston, in Guadalajara, Monterrey, Mexico City, León. So we're truly a binational firm as we help businesses expand and grow in the United States, but we also help businesses expand and grow in Mexico.
What are you seeing? What are your clients? I'm sure you're getting phone calls just like what we are and going, what do you think? Or what's going on? Or what should I do? Or whatever. And there's so much chaos. I mean, I usually tell folks, relax, don't react, respond, calm down, let the dust settle. Let's figure this out. Let's see what's going on. But at the same time, it's like, holy smokes, this is just unreal.
So first of all, Andy and Lalo, thank you very much for having me as part of your show, and I'm so glad that it's growing. Definitely, there's interest among those that devote our professional time and our lives into trade, and for you guys to bring different perspectives to the table is very valuable for everybody. Apart from leading Nepanoa, I'm also the president of the U.S.-Mexico Chamber of Commerce Mid-America chapter, which is here in Chicago, and it covers the Midwestern region. And 2 days ago, we had a wonderful event with the Consul General of Mexico and the Consul General of Canada, right? Where we invited different businesses to just have a conversation with them about what we're experiencing. And I'll make sure to share some of the insights that we learned, along in this conversation. But to your initial question, it's funny because people ask me, or they state that we're in a worse situation than we were during Trump's first term as president. And I disagree. As humans, we tend to forget the negative and stick to the positives. And I think we forgot how cumbersome it was, or how cumbersome the US-Mexico relationship was in that first term. I mean, we had NAFTA that had been ruling or guiding trade between the three nations, Canada, United States, and Mexico, since 1994, right? And it had to be modernized. But during that modernization, we had personal attacks. Remember the whole bad hombres, against Mexicans. We had personal attacks against President. At that time, it was Peña Nieto, and then López Obrador, and then their relationship got better. There was really a very bad sense or very bad environment, particularly towards Mexico. Remember, we have the wall as well that was being thrown, as a negotiation tactic, or that speech when President Trump, at the time, candidate Trump, went to visit President Peña Nieto, and they both spoke at a platform, and President Trump, or candidate Trump at the time, he blindsided President Peña Nieto, stating, we're going to build a wall and Mexico's going to pay for it, in front of Mexico's president. So when we put those things into perspective, really today, what we're experiencing is a modernization, right, of that. Okay, so President Trump, when he campaigned, he told us what he was going to do. He said, hey, I'm going to aim to impose tariffs, even on our partners, Mexico, Canada, China as well. And at the time, which I remember, it was November, I wrote a blog post about it, and it was actually picked up by the Wall Street Journal. It was published in the Wall Street Journal, where I said, this is a negotiation tactic where President Trump is bringing other aspects of the U.S.-Mexico relationship, and as well with Canada, but at the time we were focused only on Mexico, into a commercial negotiation. So in the past, since the early 1990s, because in the late 80s, early 90s, there was a very bad situation between the U.S. and Mexico, where a DEA agent in Mexico was kidnapped and assassinated. Okay, and that really broke the relationship between both countries. And then with the negotiation of NAFTA, it came back together. But that what it did is we were able to segment as countries the conversations about immigration, about security, about drugs, about trade, and they were in different departments. What President Trump is doing, as the great negotiator that he is, we have to give him that, is he's bundling everything into what hurts his partners most. And what hurts his partners the most, and notice how I say partners and not suppliers, okay? His partners the most are trade. So in this situation is, hey, I have the stick where I can use the tariffs to impose my will and my desires on immigration, on security, on drugs. And by the way, we have trade that brings this relationship. And he's doing the same thing with Canada. And he's doing the same thing with China.
But the other side of this, Alberto, is what I see is with the huge amount of drugs, the cartels, the way they're doing it, and the human trafficking and all that. It's now where Trump's trying to make this an issue. It appears to me that it would help bolster any of the Mexican politicians that are trying to take a stand. Hey, you're not by yourself in this. So there's an effort to not only on the Mexico side, but the U.S. side to work together in cleaning up some of those, nefarious parties at the table. What do you think?
So there's two situations. You mentioned first immigration, Andy, and the topic of immigration is one that is definitely a combined effort, right? We do share a border, a very long border, right? And can Mexico do a better job in avoiding immigrants from even other countries and Mexicans coming illegally into the United States? Absolutely. Nobody will deny that. And I don't think even the president of Mexico denies that. Could the U.S. do a better job as well in securing the border, right? From an immigration perspective? Absolutely, right? So it's your fault or it's my fault, and the Canada-U.S.-Mexico relationship will take it over. It's a combined region. It's North America, and we have to collaborate. And I think that President Sheinbaum has done a fantastic job in responding to President Trump's threats. I think she's been very polite, very respectful, respecting also the sovereignty of Mexico, the independence of Mexico, but stating, yes, we do have issues and we're willing to collaborate on them. What hurts me as a Mexican American, because I love both countries equally, I spent all of my adult life in the United States as a Mexican, is that it didn't happen before. It takes a threat for these conversations to actually occur, but they are occurring. The second point that you mentioned, Andy, is the drug trafficking. And the reason that I mentioned immigration first, because the point that I want to take away from immigration, it's a combined effort in immigration. And I think it's the same thing on drug trafficking. Yes, Mexico has definitely not done a good job in controlling the cartels and controlling the flow of drugs. Absolutely. Absolutely. But at the same time, there's also a responsibility from the United States, number one, at the border. Number two, in the consumption of the drugs, providing a market for it. And also even arming the cartels that we have in Mexico. So going back to my point of combined responsibility and collaboration, that has to be the approach. And I do believe, Andy and Lalo, that both governments are aiming towards this. The issue that we have with the general public or the people that don't interpret it as us is that they read the news or read a comment and fail to do a double click and understand what's behind. We're going to impose 25% tariffs on every product coming into the United States. Let's do a double click. The U.S. and Mexico trade more than $1 trillion. You're talking about the busiest border in the world. We're talking food, we're talking steel, we're talking plastics, we're talking unfinished goods, finished goods, refrigerated, oil. We're talking all sorts of products. So even the comment as it is, it grants a conversation of how is this even going to be implemented? So we understand, we say, okay, let's start a negotiation. Hey, Mexico, give me a call. Let's get together and let's, discuss. And then all other items got thrown into there, as we mentioned, immigration, security, drug, etc. With that being said, Andy, in Lalo, the tariffs are postponed at least for a month, right? Which should be March 5th, if I recall correctly, or March 6th, the first ones. Okay. And it's very clear that the coordination is already happening. Mexico sends 10,000 men to the border, right, from the army to control the border. We've seen the news, there's been, a lot of movement in Mexico trying to make things better. Okay, so things calm down a little bit. 2 weeks later, 25% tariff on steel and aluminum. Once again, public. But we're going to do it in 1 month. Andy and Lalo, you've been doing trade for a while. Do countries announce that they're going to impose tariffs on another country with a month of anticipation? Do you remember something like that? Hey, we're going to place tariffs on potatoes, but it's going to be in 5 weeks. That usually doesn't happen like that. It's not an announcement, right? It's, hey, it's going to happen. It's going to happen in 5, 6, 7 days, right? That's usually how it works. They're imposed. So once again, hey, it's going to be a month. There are going to be talks, there are going to be negotiations. My hypothesis is that the steel and aluminum tariffs are more importantly aimed towards deterring Chinese steel aluminum dumping into Canada and into Mexico, and then making its way to the United States, than imposing the tariffs on Canada and Mexico directly. And why do I say this? Because if you read USMCA, the one industry that is tremendously protected in USMCA, it's the auto industry, which includes, of course, steel and aluminum. That's the one industry, guys, right? That is super protected. And by doing this and imposing these tariffs, we can rip USMCA up because it's also written in the agreement that no country can impose unilateral tariffs on the other one. The moment that happens, USMCA is out the window and we need to come back together and negotiate, if we come back together to negotiate. So my hypothesis is that the threat for Canada and Mexico on aluminum and, on steel and aluminum is to pressure Canada and Mexico to stop Chinese steel and aluminum dumping into their country and making it back to the United States. I think that that's going to be the negotiation, and that the tariffs may not happen.
Well, and to your point, I got to say, I have virtually the same agreement in that and point of view, because here's the other thing. Going back, I think it's been a couple years, but when there was $1 billion of goods seized in a year that was part of the seized for forced labor prevention, the Uyghur forced labor prevention. And of that $1 billion, when it was analyzed, there was probably like 90 million that came directly from China. Of that, there was, and forgive me, it was roughly 300 million was from Vietnam and 400 million from Malaysia, or somewhere around in that, give or take a little bit. So the point being is that China, and keep in mind, folks, this is one thing. It's not just a U.S.-China issue. China's playing hardball with everybody around the world. And what they're doing is looking to try and circumvent some of the issues on some of the things that maybe the U.S. has put in this particular case, and taking their raw goods or components thereof and sending them out to factories in other countries. And it has been shown where China was establishing an electric car manufacturing plant down in Mexico to hopefully take advantage of the U.S. Mexican, USMCA agreement in an effort to try and manufacture the cars and stuff and bring them into the U.S. market. Well, to your point, though, is that with what I just went through, showing where Chinese manufactured items and the steel, aluminum, and those kinds of things as well get caught in it, are sent to other countries for manufacturing, confirms what your hypothesis is. And I think that's, to that point, is in the USMCA, remember, content from NAFTA to USMCA went from, if I'm not mistaken, 60% up to 75%. Supposed to be North American content. And the problem is that with all this back and forth, that's what got Volkswagen into trouble, is that their purchasing or sourcing department was looking at it and they were hitting that 75%. And then two things happened. They said, oh, we can get this component from another location for cheaper. And they wound up doing it, but then it knocked the whole thing. One, it was from China, even though they didn't buy it directly from China. And two, it lowered the content. So now you're talking about the automotive industry being so protected, and Volkswagen got themselves into a deep yogurt and trying to deal with that. So, I have to agree with you, is that if Mexico now looks and tightens up their controls regarding forced labor products, I think that's what would then enable for then the other side of this. It's negotiations. Hey, we're tightening up over here, and we're expecting now some relief over there, kind of thing.
And it's a good point. I want to clarify not clarify, but add to your comment. The first one is there's not a single Chinese auto manufacturing plant in Mexico. There's been rumors that they may set up, but today there's plenty of suppliers, especially that have set up over the last 36 months in Mexico. But there's not a manufacturing plant in Mexico. And the second one, which is very important, Lalo and Andy, who's the second best trading partner of Canada? Do you know?
Okay. The second best?
The second.
Oh, it'd be Mexico.
Second and third, Mexico, but also, you mentioned it.
China.
Yeah. And who's the second best trading partner of Mexico?
Well, China.
So if when Mexico and Canada come into a negotiation with the United States because they know they don't have the upper hand, what do you think is their plan B? And how do you think that they can actually negotiate with the United States? By pulling which lever? By accepting investment from which country? By opening the door to which products? To China. And if we follow that path, then we end up getting into national security issues for the United States and for the region as a whole. So believe me, also Canada and Mexico, I don't think they want to open that lever. They don't want to open that door. They don't not want to pull that lever, but it's there, right? So both Canada and Mexico have to be very, very, very careful in these negotiations as to how they handle their relationship with China. Because it is their plan B. It is the toughest card that they can pull at the negotiate that they can bring to the negotiation table. And at the end, if we read, if we listen, and if we read and if we do double clicks, we do understand that what the United States is doing is trying to bring Mexico and Canada to a specific level, right? While blocking or securing the region for the region, North America. With that being said, there's sovereignty issues, there's independent issues, there's politics, etc., that both of the countries have to respect and have to make sure that the United States respects as well. That brings me to my third point. What have we been doing with our clients? And I'm very proud to say this. Our clients are so smart in that our projects of investment and expansion in Mexico have continued. And the reason that they have continued, Andy and Lalo, is because number one, all of our clients do business in China. So they understand what we're talking about. They say, okay, well, if the relationship with Mexico and Canada is not the best, you want to know what's worse? The relationship with China. And the tariffs that I'm getting with China and the way that I'm operating in China. But number two, they're thinking long term, right? And they know, and because they see it, right? And each of the countries plays a demographic role into the strength of North America. We will often think about the geographic role and the geographic potential, but if we think of the demographics, right, of the people that we have, how they're educated, the assets, how we're bringing them to the table, then you understand that North America as a region is very, very strong. And I think the companies that are working with us do understand that. With that being said, every project that we do, every expansion project that we do for companies into Mexico, part of our initial analysis is, what are we going to be doing in Mexico? What are we going to be manufacturing in Mexico? And we draw the supply chain, understanding how it looks today and how it will look in the future. Literally, we get to the point of every part, where is it being sourced from? And we do an analysis stating, hey, number one, is this part of USMCA, right? And also, are there any suppliers in the US, Canada, and Mexico that can replace what we have in Asia? Are there any treaties that Mexico has with the countries that you're doing business in, Europe, Asia, et cetera? So we do that analysis to ensure that Mexico is the best option today and also going forward. And very happy to say that, we've been busy, just like you, Andy, just like you, Lalo, but not only discussing the politics of things, but actually executing and ensuring that our clients stay in business, and not only for now, but for many years to come.
Let me ask this question real quick. In that, Alberto, I recently had Mr. Allen, or we had Mr. Alan Burson, who was former commissioner of CBP, on our show, and he, I'm not gonna claim that this is my idea or thought, because this came straight from him, and I really liked what he said, and I just kind of want to get your opinion or your thoughts on this. He said something to the effect, and I'm going to try not to butcher it too much, but something to the effect that what is going on, and you mentioned it a little bit here on your current statement, what you just said, and then previously also earlier in the show, but and Andy has too, in the sense that we have an opportunity here, and by we I mean Mexico and Canada, but let's concentrate on Mexico. They have an opportunity to maybe kind of change the narrative, or kind of shift the narrative, in the sense that, okay, well, the biggest problem, obviously, that we're trying to address here in the U.S. from what Trump is suggesting, is to lower illegal immigration and, of course, drugs, right? I mean, those are the main focus there. And but Mr. Burson said, why not use this and go, think outside the box? Let's meet those requirements. Let's go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead. I mean, Mexico, go ahead and address that. Let's see what collaboratively we can come up with to address that. But what he said is, let's go beyond that. Let's do something that is actually beneficial and productive for trade, and obviously he comes from trade, and we are talking about trade here, mostly on our show and everything. But he said, why not implement ideas or processes that will not only maybe even indirectly address the drug or the immigration problem, but more importantly, the trade aspects. For example, he said, why don't we come up with, or why don't we start establishing, Mexico start suggesting ideas on how to do like a pre-clearance, start clearing items, start classifying them correctly. Not that they don't classify them correctly, but start screening. So, what other ideas or thoughts do you feel? What do you think about that? What do you feel? Or, I thought that was brilliant because, yeah, it's true. Okay, Trump, we'll call your threat. We're going to meet them and everything. But hey, let's do this. For many years, we've had to improve this. I don't know. I hope you understand where I'm going with that.
So I do get where you're going. So first of all, the team at CBP is tremendously helpful. So for any of your listeners that do international trade, particularly between U.S. and Mexico, and have not gone to the CBP website in search for answers and speaking to someone, they are very, very helpful, right? For each and every one of the projects that we do, we always connect with CBP and we confirm our findings just to make sure that we have their approval. So please, do that. Even now, within all these changes, they will provide some guidance. And second of all, Lalo, I think Mexico is doing that. We need to remember that President Sheinbaum took office in October, right? We're also on her fifth month. I'm sorry, we're in February, 5th month, right? And President Trump has been in office for 6 weeks. And in Canada, we're about to have elections for the prime minister, right? So the three countries are experiencing change. In U.S. and in Mexico, we have this every 12 years. In Canada, it's not as established, right? With that being said, Lalo and Andy, I don't know if you have seen Plan Mexico, but also for your audience, if you can Google it, Plan Mexico by President Sheinbaum. So what President Sheinbaum did is she created a committee of advisors, right, from many different industries, from business people in Mexico, from many different industries, and they came up with Plan Mexico, which is a very aggressive plan to boost Mexico's economy. A little bit of context. Mexico today is the 12th economy in the world. Plan Mexico states that it's going to be among the top 10 economies in the world by 2030, so in 5 years, okay? That Plan Mexico, Lalo, talks, of course, about employment, talks about, raising wages, talks about, exporting more, partnerships, global partnerships. It talks about the oil industry and how Mexico is going to partner with different companies to get the best out of it. But it also mentions trade. And in trade, number one, it presents IMEX 2.0. So for your listeners that do not know what IMEX is a program for companies to establish in Mexico, obtain the IMEX certification, which today it may be, some people will say 4 months. We haven't never gotten an IMEX in 4 months for our clients. We get it between 6 to 8. I really don't believe those that say 4 months, but that's another story. Where what you do is that everything that comes into your plant, your facility in Mexico is transformed, and then it goes back into the United States. Right? By getting the IMEX and VAT certification, you do not pay VAT on your imports or exports, right? They do, of course, no tariffs, right? But you have to be certified on it. It's a complex process today, and it's not only a complex process to obtain it, but it's a complex process to actually remain in compliance. We help companies do that, right? That's why we know and obtain the VAT that you have paid, especially at the beginning, etc. Well, they presented IMEX 2.0 that aims to facilitate that, and this will, of course, boost investment in Mexico for companies to come in and register as IMEX. And from a trade perspective, particularly at the border, it also has initiatives that aim to digitize, right, the border and make that process easier. Now, once again, that requires deep collaboration between Mexico and the United States, particularly the CBP, because for the last 10 years, we have heard of investments in Laredo. Now there's Puerto Verde being built, in Eagle Pass, and in Piedras Negras. And there's plenty of other projects at the border, right? We have a very long border, and let's remember that Laredo takes about 40% of the trade that we do between U.S. and Mexico. It's ludicrous. It's crazy. It's crazy that little piece that we have there, right? It should be all across. Not evenly, right? Because we know that the market is different. But as much investment that goes into Laredo, it does require efficiency, right? And that's where we need to collaborate between Mexico and CBP. And Plan Mexico does require that. So I will encourage your audience to take a look at that. Another highlight from Plan Mexico is that, just for the sake of context, Mexico in 2024 received, we still don't have Q4 numbers, but it received about $40 billion in foreign direct investment. The idea is that in 2030, Mexico will be receiving $100 billion of foreign direct investment into Mexico. Now, that does not mean that those $100 billion are all new companies entering the country. That's very important. About 75% of that, it means foreign companies that operate in Mexico and that are reinvesting and growing in the country. Okay. So I would encourage your listeners to take a look at that. And it adds to your point, Lalo, of, hey, Mexico proposing things. And that's one example of President Sheinbaum really collaborating with the private sector to put forward a plan and making it public and stating, hey, this is a commitment that we're going to work towards. And I hope that we can materialize and make it real for the region.
Well, and I love what you're saying. I will say while we were just talking, I literally just pulled up this, Plan Mexico, which I got to say that the bullet points on it are phenomenal and very ambitious.
Huh? But let's make them real now.
Well, yeah, and I could see, well, and a lot of it is economic growth and all that. But I have to say, coming back to some of the things we were talking about is, I like the idea of the what Trump's trying to do is bundle, as we were talking about, not only trade issues, but also some of the security issues, the drug issues, and all of that. Because I will say, I really don't think that Mexico on its own, let me rephrase it. This is my perspective now. Mexico has not had a good success rate in dealing with some of this. Yes, there'll be pockets here. Things will start to get a little bit better. Unfortunately, then there is a horrible price to pay because the cartels they're not going down, easily. I mean, they're fighting back, pushing back. And so there's a lot of that. Well, the fact now that the cartels have been listed now on the terrorist list. Now around the world now, there's a lot of this that can be fought. The point being, I'm saying, is that Mexico now, that I like about this, is it's not two countries kind of, at being adversaries here. We can be allies and working on some of those common goals. So I still have to come back around where China's playing hardball, and to their credit, it's China first. When we, talk about it, U.S. is trying to, push now the U.S. first. Mexico's trying to do Mexico first. I see the things, and you have a lot of respect for that. I see opportunities where we can truly align here, because when you get down to as we would say, the brass tacks on these things, we really are wanting the same thing. We're wanting to grow our economies. We want security for our people. We want businesses to flourish. We want people to flourish and all those kinds of things. And when we get down to it, it's like, yeah, there's some saber rattling here and there. But quite frankly, I got to say, Canada, U.S., and Mexico, if we truly are believing in these values that are being put forth out there, quite frankly, we need to join forces to literally go and fight and push back on China. Here's my issue on that. In China, this isn't a beat up China issue. It's just more that China's playing hardball. And to that point, China is the second largest economy in the world. So you got U.S. is number one, China number two. It dwarfs all the other economies. Okay, fine. But here's the thing that gets me. If you start looking at this, when they became members of the World Trade Organization, you may have heard me say this, I may have even said it the last time, Alberto, is part of the World Organization, you're supposed to open up your economy and your country, if you will, so others can, obviously stimulate business and all that. China has not done that. And as such, we keep going, oh, yeah, we want China, we want this, and we want the cheap imports here and there, we want all these other things. And quite frankly, it's like, well, look, I want inexpensive imports just like anybody else, but not at the sacrifice of U.S. exports. And I would have to say the same, I'm sure, is in Mexico. Don't give up the opportunities for China's strong arm and some things, whatever, at the sacrifice of being able to do some other things here in Mexico. So all said and done, I love what you're saying, and I'm hoping that out of all these things going on, we can truly come together on many fronts to promote our values.
And I agree with the part about working together and promote the value. I mean, you're talking to someone that has bet his whole career on the future of North America as a region. And that's why I started Nepanoa. That's one of the reasons why I started Nepanoa, because I saw it, similar to you, that you've done work internationally before. And I saw the writing on the wall. I was like, we have to work together. With that being said, I mean, also Mexico, it also kind of has hinted at being on U.S. side, and more than a hint, it's been actions, right? So, for example, the tariffs that Mexico placed on textile imports coming into the country are no minor thing, right? That's an important move, stating to the world and to the United States, hey, we're on your side. We're going to work together in this. You mentioned the United States classifying the cartels as terrorist organizations. And the initial reaction, from the Mexican government is, of course, it's don't do that. Why? Because the moment you do that, that gives you permission, or the United States thinks it has permission to go in and attack and use drones and this and that. Now, President Sheinbaum immediately came out and said, and she has discussed it with President Trump, stating, hey, we're going to collaborate and we're going to continue to work together. I'll give you an example. This week, there were U.S. drones flying in Mexico. The Mexican president speaks every morning. Remember, she speaks every morning. So it's not like you get a press secretary. You get the president speaking every morning. She says whatever she wants. That's another story, right? I mean, she'll take the conversation. But she came out and stated that operation was in collaboration. Said, hey, that's in collaboration with the United States. So press, hold your holsters there. Now, where I was going with that comment, Andy and Lalo, is think about the implementation and the implications that classifying cartels as terrorist organization has on businesses. Think about that. If we take this verbatim and the United States, because I mean, they have classified, it's already been ratified, but the point is, if we want to implement it, that means that every U.S. company with operations in Mexico must certify that, number one, they're not doing business with cartels, that number two, they're not benefiting cartels, that all of their employees are no members of cartels or have any relationship with them. So I'm just thinking of it from a business perspective. And if there's any entrepreneurial folks out there, right, that are listening to this, that I'm sure there are, the opportunities there are going to be, tremendous, right? Because when you look at the Fortune 1000 and realize that 75% of those operate in Mexico, well, that's going to be a big task. And just from an implementation perspective, the impacts that it's going to have in business, and that's just one of them, right? We can go into certifying exports. It really goes into things. It's a massive effort to ensure that we're in compliance with that.
Alberto, I mean, all this is amazing, and unfortunately, we're running out of time. So I don't know if we should probably do a final wrap up. Anything that you might want to say or wrap up with, only because in the interest of time. And just like last time, we told you we need to have you on the show. Same thing here. We'll bring you back. So anything else going on interesting or something you might want to wrap up with and summarize?
Oh, Lali Ando. Lali, sorry. Lali.
You're making them both. That's
Lali
awesome.
and Ando.
Yeah, where are you?
So see, Andy, I got you back for
there you
go. That's awesome.
There you go.
I'm going to post that on my social media. I was with Lali and Ando.
There we go.
So, Lali and Andy, thank you so much for having me again. I truly enjoy speaking with you. So whenever you want to have me again, and your listeners and viewers don't get tired of me, happy to come back. This is, of course, a topic that I'm very passionate about. This is what I devote my professional time to, and I greatly appreciate the opportunity to speak with people that have the experience, that understand global trade, and that have such a vested interest in this, because we're the ones that are driving, the future of North America in the end. And the final message is we need to think of the collaboration of Canada, United States, and Mexico as the future of the region. It's clear we have the assets, we have the people, we have to continue collaborating, and on every item, not only on trade, but we need to see the region as one And we're going to be, we are, I think, the most powerful region already in the world, but continue being that dominant force of good for the world. So thank you very much, gentlemen. Appreciate it.
Well, it's just, as always, it's such a pleasure. And we have a great time talking. We probably need to kind of look at a couple of weeks down the road here, Lalo, with getting Alberto back on, because there's going to be so many different things going on. All right, what's the latest? Where are we at? But really, thank you, folks. Your listenership means a whole lot to us. I can't even talk here. With that, have a great day.
Thank you very much for joining us. Simply Trade is brought to you by the generous contributions of Global Training Center. You can follow the show and GTC on LinkedIn or Twitter and other social networks. Make sure you check out the show notes in the description for a full rundown of today's show with all the important links. Also, make sure that you share this with a friend and subscribe on your favorite streaming platform. We really like hearing from you. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to rate and review wherever you listen to this podcast. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest on the show or would like to sponsor Simply Trade or suggest any topic you would like for us to discuss, please contact us via email at simplytrade@globaltrainingcenter.com, or you can DM us on Twitter at simplytradepod. Thank you again for the privilege of your time. Happy trading. Simply Trade is not a law firm or an advisor. The topics and discussions conducted by Simply Trade hosts and guests should not be considered and is not intended to substitute legal advice. You should seek appropriate counsel for your own situations. These conversations and information are directed towards listeners in the United States for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes only and should not be substituted for legal advice. No listener or viewer of this podcast should act or refrain from acting on the basis of information on this podcast without first seeking legal advice from counsel. Information on this podcast may not be up to date depending on the time of publishing and the time of viewership. The content of this posting is provided as is. No representations are made that the content is error-free. The views expressed in or through this podcast are those of the individual speakers, not those of their respective employers or Global Training Center as a whole. All liability with respect to actions taken or not taken based on the contents of this podcast are hereby expressly disclaimed.